My name is Lilie Bright, and I'm 27 years old. The night my sister Marissa graduated, I sat in the back row of the banquet hall with my hands folded in my lap, smiling the way I had been trained to smile. Quietly, politely, small enough that nobody could accuse me of ruining anything. My parents were at the front table with Marissa between them, glowing like she had personally saved the family name. My father, Richard Bright, stood up with a glass in his hand and told everyone how proud he was of his brilliant daughter. Not daughters, daughter. Then he looked around the room, full of relatives, family friends, and people who had watched us grow up, and announced that Marissa would get the full support of the family from now on. Help with her next degree, help with housing, and eventually, he said, everything he and my mother had built. People clapped. I sat in the back without a word. That was what I did. I stayed quiet. I swallowed things. I let the family joke pass over me like weather. Because in my family, Marissa was the smart one. And I was the dumb one. My father had called me that for so long, it didn't even sound cruel to other people anymore. It sounded like a nickname, like family humor, like something I was supposed to laugh at if I didn't want to look sensitive. Then the double doors at the back of the hall opened. A man I didn't recognize walked in wearing a dark suit and carrying a flat brown envelope. He didn't look lost. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked like someone who had come for exactly one reason. My father stopped talking. My mother's hand tightened around her purse. The man walked straight past the front tables, past the people turning in their chairs, and stopped beside me. He placed the envelope in my hand and leaned close enough that only I could hear him. It's time. For 1 second, I couldn't move. Then every head turned toward me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible in that room. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have protected you, stay with me. Drop your city and local time below, because I always like knowing where these stories reach. Subscribe if stories about quiet people finally being heard speak to you. Tap like if you already know silence is not weakness. And turn on the notification bell so the next story finds you when it's posted. Around here, the truth has a way of arriving exactly on time. Now let me take you back. Before that envelope, before every head turned, before my father's face went pale in front of half our family, I had spent most of my life trying not to be a problem. I worked as a patient intake coordinator at a small clinic. It wasn't glamorous. I didn't have letters after my name like Marissa was about to. But I knew insurance codes, anxious voices, appointment systems, which elderly patients needed extra patience, and which doctors ran behind on Tuesdays. At work, people trusted me. At home, they acted surprised when I remembered anything correctly. My parents called my job basic office work, usually with that soft little laugh people use when they want an insult to sound harmless. My father valued things he could brag about, degrees, titles, scholarships, awards. Marissa gave him all of that. She had always been quick, polished, confident. She could walk into a room and make people believe she belonged there. I was different. As a child, I froze when teachers called on me. I needed instructions repeated. I did badly on timed tests even when I knew the answers later. My report cards were never terrible, but they were never shiny enough to impress my father. The first time he called me dumb, I was 8. I had mixed up 2 numbers on a math worksheet, and he said it while rubbing his forehead like my confusion was something heavy he had to carry. My mother told him not to be mean, but she smiled when she said it. After that, the phrase stayed. Marissa brought home a certificate, and Dad said, "That's my smart girl." I remembered to pack my mother's medicine for a family trip, and he said, "Well, even the dumb one gets it right sometimes." Everyone laughed. I learned to laugh too. That was how you survived in our house. You made the insult easy for other people to say. But my grandmother June never laughed. She lived in a little cottage about 20 minutes outside town, with blue shutters, uneven porch steps, and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and furniture polish. When I was with her, I didn't feel slow. I felt calm. She let me think before I answered. She let me finish sentences without rushing me. She noticed things my parents ignored. Once, after Dad joked about me forgetting something, Grandma June touched my shoulder and said I noticed more than people gave me credit for. I carried that sentence for years. In her cottage, there was an old wooden table by the window where I did homework while she made tea. She kept my school notebooks even when my parents threw old papers away. She said effort left a record, even when people didn't clap for it. When she died, I was 23. Something changed after that. Not loudly, not in a way I could point to without sounding dramatic, but my parents became strange whenever her cottage came up. My father said estate matters were complicated. My mother said it was too painful to discuss. When I asked if Grandma had left anything personal for me, they told me not to obsess over old things. A few weeks after the funeral, I remembered signing a paper I didn't fully understand. My father stood over me while I did it. My mother said it was just routine. Later, when I asked about it, they acted like I had imagined the whole thing. So I stopped asking. That was what the dumb one did. She stopped asking before people could remind her she wouldn't understand the answer. But every time someone mentioned Grandma June's cottage, my father's jaw tightened. Every time I said I missed that little kitchen, my mother changed the subject. And every time I remembered Grandma telling me that the cottage would always know my name, I felt a small, uncomfortable question rise in my chest. I didn't have the words for it yet. But somewhere deep down, I knew my family was hiding something from me. After Grandma June died, I became the kind of daughter my parents could count on, mostly because I had been taught that being counted on was the closest thing to being loved. At first, it was small things. My mother had surgery the year after Grandma passed. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that she needed help around the house for a few weeks. Marissa had classes, Dad had work, and somehow everyone looked at me like the answer had already been decided. So I took time off from the clinic. I drove Mom to follow-up appointments. I wrote down medication times. I changed the sheets, made soup, answered the phone when relatives called, and cleaned the bathroom before anyone could notice it needed cleaning. When Marissa came by, she brought flowers and took pictures with Mom for her social media. Everyone said she was thoughtful. When I changed Mom's bandages at 6 in the morning before my shift, Dad said, "Well, you're good at this kind of thing." This kind of thing. Not responsibility, not sacrifice, not love. Just the quiet work nobody bragged about. That became the pattern of my 20s. If the electric bill was higher than expected, I could cover part of it. If Mom forgot an appointment, I could call and reschedule. If Dad needed someone to pick up a prescription, I was already near the pharmacy. If Marissa needed help printing forms, editing an application, finding a missing document, or getting a ride because her schedule was too packed, I was supposed to understand. And I did understand. That was the problem. I understood everyone so well that nobody had to understand me. My father still talked about my job like it was something I had settled for. He would say I worked at the front desk of a clinic, even though I handled intake records, insurance questions, patient histories, and people who came in scared, angry, confused, or in pain. At work, I was the person who remembered which patient needed a wheelchair brought to the door, and which mother needed forms explained twice without being made to feel stupid. At home, Dad once asked if I had considered doing something with my life. That same month, he asked if I could help with the water bill until his next paycheck cleared. I transferred the money after dinner from my phone, while everyone else watched Marissa open a package of graduation announcements. Mom saw me do it and touched my arm. "Family helps family," she said softly. She said it like comfort, but it always seemed to land on me like an instruction. Marissa never noticed how often that phrase cost me money. She was not cruel in a simple way. That would have made things easier. She was charming, busy, and used to being helped. If I stayed late after work to help her sort graduation paperwork, she thanked me quickly, then told Mom I was being weird if I seemed tired. If I hesitated when she asked for another favor, she sighed like I was making her success harder than it needed to be. "You're acting jealous," she told me once, not angrily, just confidently. That was how my family explained my pain. Jealousy. If I was quiet, I was jealous. If I asked questions, I was confused. If I pulled back, I was selfish. If I helped, it was expected. By the spring of Marissa's graduation, my savings account had started to feel like a leaking cup. A few hundred here, a missed repayment there, gas money, a medical copay, a dress alteration Marissa forgot to budget for, groceries when Mom said things were tight. None of it looked dramatic alone. That was how people like my parents got away with it. They didn't take everything at once. They took just enough each time that complaining made you sound petty. One afternoon at the clinic, a coworker named Andrea found me sitting in the break room staring at my banking app instead of eating lunch. She didn't pry, she just said, "Start writing it down, even if you never use it. Numbers help when people make you doubt your memory." So I did. I bought a cheap folder from the dollar store and started saving receipts. I took screenshots of transfers. I wrote dates in the Notes app on my phone. I told myself it wasn't because I was planning anything. I just wanted to know I wasn't imagining it. And once I started keeping records, other things became harder to ignore. Like the letter. It came on a Thursday, tucked between a grocery flyer and one of Dad's credit card envelopes. My name was on it, but the address label had a yellow forwarding sticker half peeled from the corner, like it had been sent somewhere else first. I only saw it because I stopped by my parents' house after work to drop off Mom's refill. Before I could pick it up, Mom reached past me and slid the mail into a drawer. "Just old paperwork," she said. I asked what paperwork. She smiled too quickly. "Nothing you need to worry about." That sentence followed me all the way home. A week later, I asked Dad if Grandma June had left anything specific about the cottage. Not money, not even ownership. I told him I just wondered what had happened to her things. The old table, the notebooks she kept, the framed picture on the porch. His expression changed before he answered. It was fast, but I saw it. "Estate matters are complicated, Lilie," he said. "You wouldn't understand all that." There it was again. Not loud, not even directly insulting. Just the old label wearing adult clothes. Mom tried to smooth it over. She said digging through Grandma's belongings would only upset me. She said grief made people attach meaning to things that were better left alone. She said keeping old documents and old papers would just keep me stuck. But I noticed neither of them ever said there was nothing to find. As graduation got closer, the house revolved around Marissa. Her dress hung on Mom's closet door like a sacred object. Dad polished his shoes 2 nights early. Relatives called to ask where they should sit, what gift Marissa wanted, whether she had decided on her next program yet. I helped address envelopes for the celebration, because Mom said her hands hurt. I picked up the bakery order, because Marissa had a hair appointment. I confirmed the head count because Dad said I was good with little details, which was the closest thing to praise he gave me when the task benefited him. Then, 2 days before the event, Mom handed me my seat card. Back row. Not with them, not near the front, not even beside an aunt or cousin who knew me well. When I looked at it for too long, Mom said, "Don't start, Lilie. It's Marissa's day." I had not said a word. That was what made it worse. They could hear my complaint before I made it, because they had already decided I had no right to one. On the night of the graduation celebration, I drove myself there after work with my dress still creased from hanging in the back seat of my car. In my purse, beneath my lipstick and keys, was a folded receipt from the bakery and a screenshot of the deposit I had sent Mom the week before. I did not know why I brought them. Maybe habit. Maybe proof. Maybe some quiet part of me was tired of being told I remembered everything wrong. When I walked into the banquet hall, Marissa was already near the front, laughing beneath the warm lights while my parents stood proudly beside her. My seat waited in the back like it had always belonged to me. So I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap, and I felt the old roll close around me. The banquet hall had that bright, polished look people use for happy occasions. White tablecloths, gold balloons, a framed photo of Marissa near the dessert table, smiling in her cap and gown like everything in her life had always opened easily. From the back row, I could see all of it. I could see my father standing near the microphone with one hand in his pocket, comfortable in the attention. I could see my mother sitting with her shoulders lifted, already smiling before he even started speaking. I could see Marissa at the front table, her hair curled perfectly, her cheeks pink from being admired all night. And I could see the empty space beside them, where I had not been seated. Dad tapped the microphone once, and the room quieted almost immediately. He started the way he always did when he had an audience. Warm voice, proud smile, a little joke about how expensive children were, which made people laugh because they thought he meant both of us. Then he turned toward Marissa. He called her the future of the family. People clapped. He talked about her discipline, her intelligence, her drive. He said some children were born knowing what to do with opportunity, and some needed a little more guidance. He did not look at me when he said that, but a few people did. I felt it like a hand on the back of my neck. I kept my face still. My purse sat on my lap. Inside it were the bakery receipt and the screenshot of the money I had sent my mother. Those little pieces of proof suddenly felt ridiculous in that room. What was I going to do with them? Stand up and announce that I had paid for cake? That was how they made everything look small. Dad lifted his glass. He said he and Mom had talked it over and decided that Marissa deserved to begin her next chapter without worrying about money or support. They would help with housing. They would help with her next degree. And someday, when the time came, everything they had worked for would go where it could do the most good. To Marissa. The applause came fast. Not everyone clapped loudly. I noticed that. Aunt Carol's hands came together slowly. One of my mother's friends looked back at me and then away. A cousin I had not spoken to in months shifted in his chair like he had suddenly become uncomfortable. But nobody said anything. Of course they didn't. In families like mine, people noticed cruelty all the time. They just called it awkward and waited for someone else to handle it. Marissa laughed softly and wiped under one eye, touched by a future that had apparently been arranged in front of me. My mother looked relieved. My father looked proud. And I sat in the back with my hands folded, feeling something inside me go very quiet. Then the double doors opened. At first, I thought it was a server, a late guest, someone from the venue coming to fix the microphone. But the man who stepped inside did not move like he was lost. He was maybe in his 50s, with a dark suit, silver hair, and a brown envelope held flat against his side. He paused just long enough to scan the room. When his eyes found me, he started walking. My father stopped mid-sentence. It was so abrupt that the room noticed. The man passed the front tables without slowing down. A few people turned. Someone whispered. Marissa's smile faded, confused and irritated in the way people get when attention slips away from them without permission. My mother's face changed first. Not surprise. Fear. Her hand closed around her purse, strapped so tightly her knuckles paled. The man stopped beside my chair. Lilie Bright, he asked. My throat felt dry. I nodded because my voice did not arrive fast enough. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm an estate attorney. I apologize for the timing, but I need to confirm delivery directly to you. Directly to me. Those words seemed to hit my father harder than the interruption itself. He stepped away from the microphone. This is a private family event. Daniel turned slightly, polite but unmoved. I understand. Previous attempts to reach Ms. Bright were returned or delayed. This required direct delivery. Returned or delayed. The room had gone so quiet, I could hear a fork settle against a plate. Daniel held out the envelope. I took it because everyone was watching, and because some part of me already knew my parents did not want me to. The paper was heavier than I expected. My name was typed across the front. Lilie June Bright. I hated that my hands started shaking. Dad gave a short laugh that sounded nothing like him. "Lilie, give that to your mother. We'll look at it later." My mother did not look at me. She stared at the envelope. That was when I understood she recognized it. Not guessed. Recognized. I slid one finger under the flap and opened it just enough to see the first page. At the top was Grandma June's full legal name. Junalina Bright. Under that was an address I knew by heart. The cottage. For a second, the banquet hall disappeared. I saw blue shutters, uneven porch steps, the kitchen table by the window, Grandma's hand resting on my shoulder while she told me I noticed more than people gave me credit for. Then my eyes found the words beneficiary and transfer of property interest and accounting inquiry. I did not understand all of it. Not then. Not with 100 eyes on me and my father breathing too hard near the microphone. But I understood enough. Grandma had left something for me. And my parents had known there was something to hide. Daniel lowered his voice. "Inside is a notice regarding the cottage, a copy summary of the trust matter, and a letter from your grandmother. We should schedule a formal meeting when you're ready." My chest tightened at the word letter. Grandma's letter. My mother finally spoke, her voice thin. "Lilie, this isn't the place." For once, I agreed with her. It was not the place. But Dad had made it the place when he announced my worth in public. Marissa stood up halfway, looking between all of us. "What is going on?" No one answered her. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. Dad reached toward the envelope, not touching it, but close enough that I pulled it back without thinking. His face hardened for 1 second before he remembered the room. "Lilie," he said carefully, "you don't understand what that is." There it was again. The old label without the word. But this time Daniel Mercer was standing beside me. The envelope was in my hand. Grandma's name was on the page. And for the first time, my confusion did not belong to me alone. It belonged to whatever they had done. I looked at Daniel, because looking at my parents felt impossible. "I'll meet with you," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I wanted, but steady enough. Daniel nodded once and gave me his card. Around us, the room stayed frozen in that awful public silence, where everyone pretended not to listen while hearing everything. My father's face had lost its color. My mother looked like she was calculating how much damage had already been done. Marissa stood at the front of her own celebration, no longer the only story in the room. And I sat in the back row, holding the envelope with both hands, overwhelmed, embarrassed, and suddenly no longer empty-handed. I did not leave the banquet hall like someone who had won. I left like someone carrying something breakable. Daniel walked me to the lobby and asked if I had a safe way home. My father tried to follow, but one look from Daniel stopped him long enough for me to get outside. Mom called my name once, soft and shaky, but I kept walking because I knew that voice. That was the voice she used when she wanted me to make things easier for everyone. 2 days later, I sat in Daniel Mercer's office with the envelope on the table between us. This time, no one was clapping. No one was watching me from across a banquet hall. There was just a legal pad, a box of tissues, and Daniel explaining everything slowly enough that I did not feel ashamed for asking questions. Grandma June had left me the cottage. Not maybe, not verbally, not in some sentimental way my parents could explain away. Legally. She had also left a modest investment account, not enough to change my whole life overnight, but enough to help with housing, repairs, and breathing room. Daniel showed me copies of letters his office had sent after her death. Some had been returned. Some had been signed for by someone else. One had been forwarded to an address I had never lived at. Then he showed me the part that made my stomach go cold. There had been questions about delayed disclosure and missing communication. Nothing dramatic enough for handcuffs. Nothing like the movies. But enough that the estate needed a formal accounting, and enough that my parents would have to answer for why I had not received what was mine. I opened Grandma's letter last. Her handwriting looked smaller than I remembered, but still careful. She wrote that I had always needed more time, not less faith. She wrote that the cottage had been the only place where I was allowed to be myself without being measured against anyone. She wrote that I should have a door no one in my family could close. I cried then. Not loudly, just the kind of crying that happens when your body understands something before your mind is ready. After that, I gave Daniel my folder. Receipts, screenshots, dates, notes, bakery deposits, bill transfers, things I had collected because Andrea told me numbers helped when people made you doubt your memory. Daniel did not call them petty. He called them records. That word stayed with me. The fallout was not clean. It was not everybody suddenly realizing I had been right all along. Some relatives avoided the subject. Some said my father had handled it badly, but meant I should still be quiet. Aunt Carol called me the next morning and said she was sorry she had clapped. That apology mattered more than she probably knew. Dad tried to control the story. He told people it was a misunderstanding. He said Grandma had been confused near the end. He said I was being influenced by a lawyer who wanted fees. But too many people had seen his face when Daniel walked in. Too many people had heard him tell me I would not understand. Mom came by my apartment 3 times in 1 week. The first time she cried. The second time she brought soup. The third time she asked if I really wanted to embarrass the family over paperwork. That was when something in me finally settled. I told her I was not embarrassing the family. I was no longer protecting the parts of it that had embarrassed me for years. She looked hurt, and I hated that it still hurt me. Marissa was harder. At first, she was angry, not because of the cottage, she said, but because I had let it happen at her graduation. I reminded her I had been sitting in the back when it happened to me. She did not answer right away. A few days later, she texted me asking whether I had really paid for the bakery order and part of Mom's bills. I sent her the screenshots. She did not apologize then, but she stopped accusing me of jealousy. That was enough for the moment. I did not sue my parents into ruin. I did not stand in anyone's yard and scream the truth. I cooperated with Daniel. I stopped paying bills that were not mine. I stopped answering every urgent call. I stopped being available just because someone had trained me to feel guilty. The formal accounting began. My parents had to produce documents. Their friends stopped asking them about Marissa's future and started asking quieter questions about Grandma June's cottage. The image Dad had polished for years did not shatter all at once. It cracked. And this time, I did not rush to fix it. A month later, I sat at the small kitchen table in my new apartment. The envelope lay open beneath my hand, flat now, no longer frightening. Beside it were the cottage documents, a photo of me and Grandma June on her porch, and one of my old school notebooks Daniel's office had found in a box from the cottage. On the front page, in red ink, my teacher had written, "Lilie works carefully and never gives up." I looked at that sentence for a long time. Then I placed the notebook in a drawer. I picked up the cottage keys and closed my fingers around them. On the edge of the table sat my parents' house key. For years, that key had meant I could be called whenever someone needed me. It had meant errands, emergencies, guilt, and walking into a house where I had to become smaller before I even took off my shoes. I left it there without a note. Because I finally understood something Grandma had tried to teach me years ago. Sometimes the people who call you weak are depending on you not to notice your own strength. And I was done living in a room where the dumb one was the only name they knew how to give me.